Hey, the rulers, DMO73 here, bringing you a showdown between myself playing the Millium 1, Millium 2 plus Ryula deck with all of the dice rolling. It's a lot of dice. Versus Paul Reisman, who is trying out Wukong with all of his new myths, including the Tang Sanzang Infinite. Let's go ahead and see who comes out on top by jumping right in. Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to pre-order upcoming Force of Will sets, ccgprime.com for singles and supplies, cardodoko.com for those rulers in the international market looking for product, and to our guest lecturer members, Vite Ramen. Class is in session. So as we get into it here, don't forget that you can go sign up for our March circuit event for the Skib display mat going on over on our Discord server through the link in the description, and go check out the information for all of the competitive events this season, including Force of Will Festival. All of that information is down below. We hope to see you there. So we're trying new myth Wukong and a deck, just for fun, I'm calling it Ryula Can't Decide, because you're going to constantly swip back and forth between the two Milliums, thanks to the Ryula Subruler. Wukong using some really cool stuff with on the Palm of Buddha, Tang Sanzang, and setting up some potential infinites, which is really, really cool. And the way the Millium works is you just generate a lot of force counters. Every time you force, you get to add an extra die to it if you want. You get to extra draw cards through Ryula every turn. There's a lot of value to be generated. And Paul's going to be going first, so he's going to get to start with that Subruler as we set up our mulligans here. One of the nice things that you'll see in that opener that we will put into play is that star scale of the dragon, because I am Millium, so I can use that without having to worry about my stones not being able to recover. So star scale of the sacred dragon is active. I lose access to rogue spectator. It gets canceled, so it is no longer there for me to use, and we're off to the races. So Paul hits a non-magic stone there right off the top, and we get to see, so didn't know that this was happening when we were recording it. Star scale just getting to hit a stone right off the top. If Paul taps it, it does not get to recover. Mine do, because I get to, I have a ruler with Millium in its name. Right there at the beginning of the turn, a force roll for Ryula, choosing not to swap, but I do get to draw an extra card. And then we go into thinking about maybe doing a turn one play, but ultimately just kind of seeing if we can kind of respond to Paul first, especially since we're in a better position here with him having a stone that gets tapped, like right now. So he's going to try to maybe make use of the... He's got to be really careful here, because if he goes too greedy, the stones will tap him down, and I'm holding up a lot of will for interaction. So not only will he potentially fail the exchange, but then he won't get to recover. So using Staff of the Monkey King to go search for Flying Cloud with Wukong. And then he's going to use On the Palm of Buddha here at the end of the turn to try to cheat in a body. Now we could have mirrored this by burning a blue card in hand. We have mirror, and then we could cycle and draw. Ultimately, I don't think we really mind too much there. We are going to see if we can maybe draw into something, though. Dark Alice Rabbit Princess comes in, getting rid of that other star scale, because I certainly don't need two. And I probably don't need two frogs, so we're going to pitch that as well. On the Palm of Buddha gets to resolve. He gets to search for a myth, put it into his hand, and then because he has a flying cloud, he can then resolve the next piece of it, which is to pitch that flying cloud and put in a myth. So Tang Sanzang gets to come in here and get him two counters, and then also gets him another Tang Sanzang or a clothing magic, whichever one he chooses to search for. To set up the infinite, you're probably going to go for a second Tang. He is able to play this next turn because the staff can make a will for myths, so that will at least get to recover, but he isn't going to have his stone, so it's a little bit risky, because then he'd be fully tapped out. Although he's already pretty close to being able to set up the infinite here. Hitting a second stone that does not recover off of the Moonshade here is really unfortunate. We're going to see if maybe Paul just leaves up some points of interaction, or if we're just going to pass the turn. Going to go ahead and use Flying Cloud's ability to draw one and put a card back on bottom of deck, which is probably the Flying Cloud that he will just research for using the staff if he wants to. Swings in for 9. We're going to go ahead and say that's fine. We'll lose the Dark Alice. At the beginning of the turn, we'll roll again. We are going to swap this time, so now we have Dragon Millium and +1 force count, Dragon Power counter, and we will draw an extra card. So you can see you still get to do a lot of card draw power here in this deck, which is really awesome. Leaving up the 1 blue Dragon Stone here because we want access to be able to use our mirror now to play Constantino the Lucky Boy. This is particularly bad for Paul. So that Tang Sanzang now doesn't get to recover in any way, shape, or form, and probably means that the infinite is just not available to him, which is really rough. On top of that, we are going to get a Kid Puss in Boots, who on enter you force 1 and put that many +1/+1 counters on him, but it gets doubled because of Constantino, and the dice themselves are also doubled thanks to Ryula. So that just came in as a 11/11, which is nice. And we still have Mirror in hand to be able to respond to something. Once again, Paul is kind of, before recovery, going to make use of searching for that Flying Cloud, which we put on bottom, and then he can use the staff ability to, again, draw a card and put a card back on bottom. So both of these decks having a way to keep card advantage pretty high, all things considered. Paul just has to try to figure out how to get rid of this Constantino, because right now Constantino is the biggest issue for him. Sorry for that little cut. We had to step away from the table for just a second, but we are back. Paul can call stone here. Another stone that doesn't recover, hitting 3 in a row. Really unfortunate here. The deck does play stones with types. It's just really unfortunate that he also had been to hit 3 of them right off the bat. Because Kid Puss in Boots is probably going to take the Tang Sanzang out of the way, even if he does burn cards to try to remove the Constantino out. Beginning of the turn, we do force. We are going to swap again, go up to 5 Dragon Power counters. Draw for turn. Don't get to the extra draw, which is okay. Call stone with Millium. That gets us an extra Dragon Power counter, thanks to Millium being granted the name by the Ryula Subruler. And then we're going to try to knock out the Tang Sanzang with Kid Puss in Boots. Paul's like, I need to get rid of this now, so we have Riding on the Storm, a 2-cost spell here that can target the Constantino. He has barrier 1 or less, so it's going to be able to deal 900 damage to Constantino. So this does set him up to be able to recover. The unfortunate thing is here that takes all of his stones to be able to do, which is really unfortunate. But then the Kid Puss in Boots knocks the Tang out of the way, and we're good to go. So we're going to follow it up with a Frog Prince here to generate some extra force possibilities. Another Constantino here would have been particularly devastating, but c'est la vie. This is just primarily a way for us to get some additional manipulation of force, as well as extra force counters to be able to Judgment Dragon Millium faster if we ever get to that point. Although we are kind of being the aggressor right now, Constantino gave us a pretty good opening, and Starscale is really putting the pressure on Paul to be able to make any decent plays. Once again, doing that little cycle with the Flying Cloud. Double checking that the Monkey Staff should actually have the 2 +1/+1 counters from Tang. Finally seeing a stone that will be able to recover, having a type, but this does not leave Paul with much room to interact. And as you saw before, we do have a mirror in hand, so we feel pretty comfortable with our ability to interact with whatever Paul might be trying to do here. Now he does have a Regions in Grave, so if he had a Regions in hand, he could try to cast it here and call another stone, which would be probably potentially pretty good. Ultimately, he decides to use Staff of the Monkey God as the Regalia side. I think you could probably quick cast that rather than try to go for main, but he does decide to just let it happen. We have to target something with the whenever we force, so we're going to be using just the frog part. We were trying to see if we could maybe get under without making him a tiny guy, but unfortunately he is just a 9, he's a 1/1 naturally anyway, so becoming a 1/1 with the counters on him doesn't really change much in terms of how much he's going to hit. So we're going to try to do Magical Kiss here before recovery. We are going to do 3 dice here to try to make that work so we can make the Prince token. We have high enough number there, so we go back to being a 1/1, but then we turn into a frog, so we go back to being a 1/1 again, a non-frog. So Magical Prince gets shuffled back in, Puss in Boots is back up to his normal sense, get an extra dragon power counter on Dragon Millium, and we get a 6/7 Eternal multi-strike Fairy Tale Prince. Drawing it out on our new little infinity tokens. Don't mind my bad drawing skills here, but it's necessary, as you'll see in coming weeks with Valentina 3, to have these kinds of tokens. Move to recovery. Calling a stone. We're going to go ahead and use the Prince because it is a fairy tale for Cage of Mother Goose, because Prince can't attack this turn, to try to get that out of the way. And then we're just going to swing in for 9. We have a Grimm's Family Crown of Stars, which is another nice way to keep up the draw power, as well as generate additional force rolls here. It's going to have floated the green will, so we do get to draw an extra card. Oh no, I only rolled 5, so we do not get to draw a card there. So pretty good board presence here, trying to force things down with Paul, with the star scale really helping us get a lot of freedom against the deck. Where even though Paul gets discounted, he does still need multiple pieces of will, multiple pieces of interaction per turn to be able to set up. And right now with the taxing of his stones, he's just not in a good spot for that. Although this turn he will be able to play 3 costs worth of stuff. He has another stone. This would be a good turn for a Rejones if he has one. He could use Monkey Staff +1 to play Rejones. He's going for an Ultra Magic Stone Golem because he has 4 different stone types. But we do have the mirror to be able to say, no, that's not going to happen. We don't want that happening. So we're in a pretty good spot to kind of just force lethal here next turn if we get even a slight amount of damage. Because the Prince will be, all in all, we'll be taking Paul down to like 3. The Puss in Boots is hitting for 11. The Prince is hitting for 14 or 12. So 23. So taking Paul down to 5. Paul just trying to think what he could do in this situation with 1 will, or just having to move to discard it, clean up at end of turn, and that is what we see. We see Paul move to clean up at end of turn. Having to discard a Flying Cloud and the Palm of Buddha. Beginning of turn trigger, we're going to go ahead and roll. We are going to choose not to swap. We're just going to draw a card. We get a dragon power counter there because it sees we performed a force effect, not because we swapped. Just to be clear there. Could try to do judgment here, although it would cost us 4 will because it's, we're only discounting our cost by 2 right now. We could get to 2 more to have it be there, and that's what we're going to do with Crown of Stars. So we draw a card there. And we do not gain any life, but we did get to perform 2 different force effects, so we go up to 12 counters. So now our discounted judgment is discounted by 3, so we have to pay 3 for judgment if we wanted to, and we'd roll a bajillion dice, but I don't necessarily know if that's the right thing to do right now. It's not really doing much. We can just leave a bunch of interaction up or try to find a way to find lethal this turn, potentially. Play more bodies, do something like another Constantino. Like another Constantino here would probably just seal the deal. Paul has nothing on board. He has no way to really establish pressure. So the Constantino's like probably just going to survive for forever. We swing in for 11, go take him down to 17. Swing in for 6 with multi-strike, takes him down to 5. And then we do decide to go ahead and play Constantino here. So unless he has something like a Fossil Grill in the city to try to stop it, this is a bad spot for him. And he has 2 Sanzangs, a Cloning Magic, and a Fairer spell in hand. None of those are going to help here against the Constantino setup. Gets another Kid Puss in Boots. We're going to double roll for that. So now, essentially, anything other than Constantino is just lethal next turn. So hitting a bunch of counters onto Kid Puss in Boots. 2 more counters onto Millium for seeing 2 force effects, and then we pass. At the end of my turn, he's going to cast another staff here. He's going to use staff to search for Cloud. And then in response, before we get any further, we are going to full cast Alabaster Spellweaving Shaman. In this deck, it works to full cast it because it gets an extra force effect, right? There's an extra reason, and getting Dawn of the Earth is great. So we get a free Dawn of the Earth, not that it matters. But Alabaster Spellweaver Shaman in this case is really bad for Paul. He can play the first 10 Sanzang. It'll come into play tapped. He cannot possibly play the second one because it will be discounted and therefore removed from the game. So he has essentially 3 will to try to do something, 4 will to try to do something, but against a board that has a multi-strike Eternal Body on it, as well as so many things at pressure. There's just nothing here that will find Paul where he needs to be. Like, even an Ultra Magic Stone Golem doesn't help here because it'll wipe the board, but it doesn't even get to get cast. First off, Alabaster Spellweaving Shaman just says no. But even if the Alabaster wasn't on field, Constantino says the Ultra Magic Stone Golem would come into play tapped, and then my Prince would survive and would be able to push through for game 2. Moving into game 2 here, Paul choosing to go first again, so he has that Subruler active. You know, we saw that the Star Scale really put in a lot of work in that name, as well as the Constantinos. So obviously we're going to try to see if we can find those again. In this one, especially if we're going second, the idea of like turn 1 Constantino would be pretty huge, especially if we can also see Star Scale, and Paul gets those other stones. Rogue Spectator, so that means we do not have a Star Scale in the opener of this hand. Go see a pass from Paul. Now, Alabaster is also just very good here against things like On the Palm of Buddha. He doesn't have to actually cheat in the Resonator. He can choose to just only do the search part because it is resolve, then resolve. Setting up, getting our Dragon Power counter, extra card here at the start of the first turn. We do have that Constantino in hand, it looks like, so we might see a coin out of that on turn 1. We might also see a different line here. Oh no, it doesn't look like a Constantino. It looks like a couple copies of Millium's weapon. Might also just leave Will open. Going to choose to go ahead and burn coin to put out Frog. Frog Prince here. See Paul doing that cycling, gets produce a will to be able to grab a Flying Cloud. Gonna try to draw, then draw again. Using that Flying Cloud, although we might see an On the Palm of Buddha come down here. Do go ahead and see On the Palm. So he's gonna get to go get a 10 Sanzang. So some good value there. with our force roll, if we had a way to do force right now, we'd be able to make the Tang into being down to only 100 power. So it'd be 300, but you know, then our frog could block. Currently it can't. So you draw from Paul. Second stone with a stone type. So, you know, Star Scale wouldn't have done much this particular game. Swings in for 9. We're going to say that's fine. We'll go ahead and take it. Going into our turn, if he passes, we're going to try to do the Ryula trigger, which will perform force. I'll have to target with Frog to try to target Tang Sanzang. He is going to burn a kilo of Fossil Girl in the city here. This is a good idea because if I could set the Tang down to being a 1 cost or 100, then this Frog would be able to swing in and kill it. And he wants to keep it on board as long as possible. Get another Dragon Power counter there. Still no Constantino. A Dark Alice to try to see about getting one, though. Draw some extra cards here. Reason why we're playing this main phase is because we also have some other spot removal options here. We do see the Star Scale there, but it's not worth our time knowing how many stones Paul already has alive. We're going to go ahead and try to use that Cage of Mother Goose to get rid of the Tang. He can try to quick cast in 1 for 2 at this point in time, but then he risks like walking into an Alabaster, which would be, you know, pretty backbreaking if he lost 2 in one go. Do see a kilo of Fossil Girl in the city. We think about mirroring that, and then we go, you know, that's fine. Actually, we're going to let the Cage of Mother Goose resolve. That's fine. It's going to take you 3 to have to recast him. Doesn't leave you with much will to be able to respond after that. This is me kind of double checking how much will he'll have post recovery. So we're going to go ahead and let that happen. He gets the Tang back to his hand. Moves to recovery. Oh, still forgets before recovery to go ahead and do the Flying Cloud cycle here. Really is a lot of card value generated by both of these decks, which is kind of cool. Third stone without a type. Really glad I got rid of that Star Scale now. Paul's just trying to see exactly how much he wants to fight into this situation. He knows there's a mirror. Looks like he might be thinking about a Rejones play, maybe. He does have one in hand, although he'd be potentially walking into Mirror if I choose to cast it. Now, that being said, if he has 2 Rejones in hand, then Mirror just doesn't really do much here. Pays 100. Does, in fact, pitch the Rejones. And we do not Mirror it, which I think actually might have been maybe a mistake. It's not necessarily so, because the Wukong... or the Rejones is also a myth. It doesn't super do a ton. If we like cancel it, then he has it on the palm of Buddha, then he gets to go search one anyway, and then he gets to still recast it. Like, he gets the value kind of regardless off of the Rejones. It's just a matter of like how much will does it cost. I'd rather save the mirror for something like an on the palm in general. He is going to get to call more stones now, so that gets a little bit nuts because the staff could help pay for the green. He pays 1 void less, so he just has to play another darkness to be able to recast the Rejones. Does see a crown stone. If he had a second Rejones in hand, he could God Art to make black and play it and then get another stone this turn, but that'd be pretty risky. Dragonoid Beekeeper comes down here. We're going to try to... we have to target our own Dark Alice because Rejones has barrier non-fire. In response to the beginning of turn trigger here, we're going to see that riding on the clouds so that Rejones can try to put some damage and kill both the Beekeeper as well as the Dark Alice if she gets converted into being a toad. So now I'm kind of deciding how many dice to roll. She will get converted into a toad with 300 damage, so the Dark Alice is also going to get removed this turn, unfortunately. And I am going to go ahead and swap. Lose the Dark Alice because she has enough damage on her at that point in time. And then we go into recovery. Would really like to see, still just trying to find a Constantino to try to play here. Have another Beekeeper. Ultimately just choosing to pass the turn there, leaving up a lot of will for interaction. Move to recovery. Sees a 4C stone. It's going to get to call a second stone this turn, thanks to Rejones. Paul's sitting pretty solidly here in terms of will value. Decides to play another Rejones, so he's going to get to call another stone this turn. Ships that card to the bottom. So just a lot of will open for Paul. Paul's really setting himself up to be able to go in for kind of some combo shenanigans and protect it. Does have to watch out for mirrors. Alabaster is going to be the next big threat for him to deal with. Riding on the storms doesn't super help there because you can't target Alabaster. It has barrier chant. Frog's gonna try to set himself. Swap and gain another dragon power. We've got a Milliums weapon. We've got a Crown of Stars. Just gonna be calling stones. We're at a point now where Paul's going to get to grab 3 stones next turn because of the Rejones. So we are really starting to fall behind resource-wise. Game 1, we were ahead resource-wise because of the star scale. Game 2, Paul was like, no, I've got this under control. We're just going to ramp ahead and hit all of our stones that we need. And so he'll have a lot of freedom to kind of do whatever he needs to here. We attempt to pass turn. We see a cast of a Tang. It's going to get to search for another Tang. He's going to hold priority. In response to the Tang's enter effect, we're going to try to do Magical Kiss to try to force it to be a 1/1. Intentionally picking to only roll above, the 3 here, which is nice, above the number we need to make it a frog, but below the number we need to no longer be a frog ourselves. So that we've kind of converted it into being a 1/1. And now we are still at our frog self. Paul says that's fine. We'll go ahead and cast in another Tang Sanzang. It's still going to get the enter effect because frog doesn't remove all of their abilities. It just makes them stats and racially different. Then in response to the 2 enter effects, we're going to go ahead and try and cast Spirit of the Crimson Moon. This is going to not have anything to target, so it has to get expelled or removed. But we are going to play a Tinkerbell, Spirit of the Light Trials. We are going to try to wipe the whole board. Paul tries to pitch that Kilo of Fossil Girl, and that makes us burn one of our mirrors to stop it. So that is going to get to clear all of this off the board. Now, this isn't my end step, so Paul still gets to search for 2 cards, so he gets to kind of reestablish. He can grab a Cloning Magic and another Tang, and then he can kind of keep going from there. And it just kind of stopped the additional ramp. Like, I think if I hadn't cleared the board there, we were probably dead. Although arguably with the Tinkerbell, we could have also just waited and seen what Paul did, leave up open all that will, and set ourselves up for maybe something a little bit stronger, or clearing more things off the board. Paul's got a lot of resources available. Just a matter of what he's going to do with them. You know, the Tangs are quick cast, so there's not really a reason for him to play anything right now. But he is sitting with just so much will that maybe it's at least fine to put something on board. He is just going to go ahead and pass there. We're going to do Magical Kiss just to try to pump up our numbers here. Seeing if maybe we can also get a Frog to kind of start pressuring down on his turn, or on our turn. In comes the Tang Sanzang, now that I've already targeted myself because of the force effect. And we're going to see, he starts to try to go into this line, but then forgets that Frog has barrier, so this doesn't actually do anything. So we actually just kind of rewind a little bit there, and he's just going to let it resolve. Choose the lower number so I don't swap out, get an extra power counter here, mainly just doing it again to try to generate as many power counters as I can. Hitting the power enough to be able to swap. Still just trying to draw into that Constantino. Still haven't found one. I remember saying that at that moment while we were recording. Still can't find it. Just cannot find draw power or Constantinos to try to help myself here. Paul pointing to Return of Judgment as if I have to target something, but under the new CR, Millium, this Millium is still my starting ruler, so it doesn't actually generate me anything to be able to target, even though I've swapped it out and swapped back. 4 Sea Stones continuing to not giving anything. We'll use Millium as Mastery for Grimm's Family Crown of Stars. The Ryula gives him this name, so he can still be used as Mastery. This just is, again, sets us up for some more force stuff, as well as being able to kind of draw into something else, and sets us up for being able to, once we get Dragon Power out again, we can generate a bunch of force counters all at once, and hopefully maybe the draw from it will find us that Constantino. Paul's going to take advantage of the situation, though. We're going to see an On the Palm of Buddha. We could most certainly do a mirror here, but I think in my brain I'm trying to hyper-focus on stopping the cloning magic cast with this mirror. So I don't think about stopping On the Palm of Buddha. Also don't have an Alabaster, which is really unfortunate. It would really help me here. He sees Sha Wu Jing and puts that into play, and this is where we certainly should have mirrored. The Sha Wu Jing is going to make it so that all of my stuff costs 1 more, which means my mirror now costs me 2. So now I only have 1 point of interaction, and Paul has a million will to be able to play with here, which puts him in a really good position. Even if I do then cast Alabaster, I'm not in a position to be able to follow up with any kind of mirror play at all here too. He also can just full cast Tang Sanzang here for 3. Interesting that he didn't use the Monkey God Staff for that, just to leave out regular stones for more interaction. But ultimately, he fails to find. We've seen he must have 1 more Tang in hand, or he only plays 3. So Pollock just gets to draw, goes to his turn. He's going to add those extra +1/+1 counters to his Xiaowu Jing. And then also use Monkey Staff to move those +1/+1 counters back to Xiaowu Jing. So it's a much larger pressure here. And so I'm in a little bit of danger. I don't have very many points of interaction. The little lockdown from Xiaowu Jing certainly makes it rough. He should have moved some of those +1/+1 counters to Tang, which is kind of relevant here. It doesn't super matter. Here in the long run, we play a Zhubaji. And a Judgment of Wukong. He does have Flying Clouds. With the Zhubaji out, he is going to get to have Swiftness and be swinging in the air for 14, because both Xiaowu Jing and Zhubaji are both pumping him up. And he has Flying as well. Swings on the ground for 15. I'll say, sure, I'll take it. Although technically it should be 2 less. Because he'd certainly want to keep some +1/+1 counters. He would have wanted to give some +1 counters to Tang. We're going to respond to the attack declaration of Tang to try to make him Crown's Family Court of Stars, to try to make the Tang a 1/1, so I can take 100 damage from this. He says, in response to the fate trigger, or to the trigger, we're going to go ahead and toss a Fossil Girl in the City to cancel the automatic, so I can't successfully make it into being a smaller thing. We do get to draw a card, though. Play a Dragonoid Beekeeper, mainly because this is another chance for us to try to make him to being a 1/1. We will try to block. In response to blocks, force trigger to try to make him into a 1/1. We're going to see that Riding on the Storm. This is going to kill both my Millium and my Beekeeper, so that'll get those out of the way. So even if I do set him down to being a 1/1, he's still going to get to hit me for 1. Takes me down to 15, which at that point in time, Wukong will hit me for 14, leave me at 1 life. Would not be very good. And if he had put the +1/+1 counters where they needed to be, then he could just recover the Tang. So finish trying to resolve the force, seeing if we can make it into being a 1/1. We do, so we don't have to. We only take 100 damage, and or we gain 600 life, which is helpful. And then we only take 100 here. Swings in with Wukong for 14, takes me to 7. And then at that point in time comes down the cloning magic. Again, this is the piece where he'd also draw a card. He certainly played another card this turn because of Torrent. He removes the +1/+1 counters from Tang. He has to remove the +1/+1 counters from himself. Ultimately, it's just an execution error. He certainly had the damage here regardless to not put as many +1/+1s on Xiaowu Jing using the Subruler. It's just a matter of sequencing there. So just don't forget that for game 3. So going into game 3, we're going to be going first, and we're going to be trying to rush things down. The Constantino really helps us set up. He doesn't have the Subruler to try to start that draw power. We're going to swap right out the gate to go into extra dragon power counters here. Trying to find the die. Calling Stone. We get our first Dragonoid Stone. And like I said, we're just going to go ahead and pass. And the reason why we're passing here is because of that Beekeeper in hand. So we want to try to leave up the Beekeeper as like we can't attack on turn 1 anyway, so there's no reason to tap out against Paul. And if Paul does something with like On the Palm of Buddha, we also would want to be able to mirror it potentially. He hits Crown Stone here, which is not super great, though he has the God's Art to be able to produce 1 green if he wants. He could also burn coin. Ultimately, though, I think he does decide to just pass. So passes the turn, we flash in that Dragonoid Beekeeper. It's going to be able to start our force rolls here. Beginning of the turn, we're going to go ahead and just force to try to swap. We get so low we don't get to do anything. Calling a stone, 4 Sea Stone, and our good friend Constantino gets to come out here. Even a Fossil Girl in the City, which Paul does have in hand, would cost him his coin, which would not feel super great. And Constantino would still get his tax down effect, which is also not great here. 5 on the first roll, 11 on the second roll. So 16 +1/+1 counters on the Puss in Boots, ready to force things down. We swing in with Dragonoid Beekeeper. We're going to try to force again. We hit a 6, so we gain 600 life and put 2 +1/+1 counters on it, so we get to hit Paul for 5. And we get an extra Dragonoid power, or Dragon power counter on Millium. Or it might be 4 or 5. So fully tapping out, but not really feeling too worried about it. You see Paul has multiple of these, the crown, like on the storm or whatever, but he has to get a body out to do it. Ultimately, though, choosing to use coin here to play the staff, as opposed to something like God's Art off of the crown. Move to recovery. Nothing really much going on here. Tang Sanzang doesn't really help him. Hits a 4 Sea Stone. Sees a Kilo of Fossil Girl, chooses to ship it. Says, I don't need that right now. Does think about trying to play something, but ultimately, like, there's not a real reason to. Even, like, because he only has 3 will available, even the extra myth spells thing doesn't really help because it'll just come into play tapped. And then he needs 4 will to be able to start actually destroying stuff, which is a problem because his spot removal has to cost 2 to be able to kill the Constantino. And even then he might just be out of luck anyway. So he does decide to just pass the turn, I think. Has to discard the hand size, gets rid of one of those on the storms. We're going to force at the beginning of the turn. Choose not to swap. I'm just going to draw an extra card, perform a force effect, and then draw for turn. Starting things out, we're going to try to go into combat here. We're looking at life totals, and we're seeing, hey, you know what? Let's see what happens. We have another Beekeeper in hand and a Milliums weapon, and that's kind of the reason why we're thinking about this, about just seeing if we can try to go in and get aggressive. It's not terribly too bad if it doesn't work out, because again, like Paul can't give us any blockers, like attacks are going to happen. The best he can do is try to cancel, because his only spot removal, again, costs too much will. So he's just going to be able to try to like cancel the pressure, and at that point in time, it's still fine. So we rolled high enough. This is going to hit him even harder. We're going to hit gain for 6, take him down to 3,000. We're going to try to swing with Constantino, knowing that it's safe from any kind of block. Because, you know, unless he's playing Dark Alice, which we know he probably isn't, it's just going to get to come into play and be rested. Now, something like Chubby Five-Tailed Fox could also work here to be able to swing, come in and block. Or if he had just like any Fairy Tale also could work, because it only stops non-Fairy Tales. But in this deck, probably not going to see much of that. We're going to see myths, not Fairy Tales. Now, interestingly enough, if he had used the God's Art of Crownstone to be able to play the staff, he actually could have 4 will available here because he'd still have coin. So he'd be able to play Tang Sanzang, and he'd be able to play On the Storm to be able to at least stop the Constantino to be able to recover the Tang, even though he'd take all this damage from the Puss in Boots. So he does decide, says, hey, there's nothing I can really do here. We're just going to go ahead and probably say that's fine. We're going to take the damage, go down to 27 and call it. there. We'll try to flash in Tang Sanzang and end a turn and do something after that point. But little does he know, he has sealed his own fate, because I swing in for 17 here, and then in response to no blocks, we're going to flash in a second Dragonoid Beekeeper, and then each Beekeeper gives this Millium's weapon an additional cost, so I have to force twice, and if I succeed in both force twices, then each of these Dragon Beekeepers get to put 2 more copies of Millium's weapon on the chase, which goes us up to plus 10, and so Puss in Boots swings in for exactly 27 and closes out the game. So there you guys have it. Got to see both decks. A ton of fun. We'll have deck profiles for both of these lists up later this week. +1/+1 counters and Dragon Powers counters applied. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. And until next time, this is DMO73 saying class dismissed.